Steelers general manager Kevin Colbert is a class man. He's a gentleman. He comes over here and joins us.
He likes my chair.
He does like your zero-gravity chair. Now, behind us is the big fire pit here at St. Vincent College in Latrobe. And there are an array of nice wooden peddler chairs from out in the country, the peddler out here on Route 30. And I'm not sure if Kevin's the driving force behind this nighttime activity, Kevin, but you get a little taste of it anyway while you're out here?
Kevin has the rocking chair.
Actually,
I saw your name on it.
If you get close to those are the nice plastic variety from Walmart.
Oh, okay. Not that elegant?
No.
Appreciate you coming by.
No problem. What's going on?
Not too much. Much to get to. I wanted to. You got 5 preseason games this year, Kevin, and unfortunately your kicker went down in week 1. Is this always a time of year where you watch these games and just sort of cringe everywhere? You're just hoping to avoid the major blow to one of your starters.
Well, you are, and you understand that injuries will occur in the preseason. There's probably been over 100 guys throughout the league that have been waived injured or put on reserve injured already to this point. But that's to be expected. It's a collision sport, and until the players get up to speed, there will be injuries that occur. And unfortunately, we did lose a starter, and you don't expect to lose a starting kicker, but it was a freak accident. It happened, and it's our job to try to get another.
And do you anticipate with the changes with the extra points, with a different kicker, a different philosophy at all this year? If it's 4th and 2 at the 30, I mean, Sean was so money on from the 40 to the 49. Do you think that'll change what Mike's doing?
I think once we get a comfort level with what Garrett Hartley or whoever our kicker happens to be, if it isn't Garrett into the season, once we figure out what their range is and how comfortable we are, I think you would see that'll change regardless. It was going to change because of the new rule. Now it's a new kicker and a new rule, so I think we'll find out in the next 3 weeks what his comfort level is, meaning Coach Tomlin is with Garrett. Going for 2, especially in the northern climates late in the year.
Kevin Colbert, Steelers general manager, our guest here on TribLIVE Radio. I wanted to ask you, too, about you got to see Landry Jones more because of the extra preseason game, maybe, or 2 games with him in there. What goes into your thinking of whether or not to keep a third quarterback on the roster, Kevin? Is there ever a temptation to use that for another spot?
We've always had the philosophy that we want to have 3. It's such a demanding position. There's so much learning that has to go into it. As we mentioned earlier, guys are going to get hurt, and you never want to get caught short at the quarterback position. So we've always wanted to have 3. There's been times when we've gone with 2, maybe for a given game. We've had Charlie Batch out for a weekend or Byron Leftwich out for a weekend, and we went with 2. But in general, we want to have 3. But every year will be different depending on the roster makeup that we have after we come out of this camp.
Are you happy with what you've seen with Landry? I mean, we haven't seen him in a regular season game ever, but this is the most we've got to see him play. Do you think he's made some progress?
Yeah, I think he made progress in camp because he was getting more work with the 1s and 2s, and that's good, but he's also going against the 1s and 2s. So when he's had better players to work with against better players, he's shown up and done well. I think he'd like to exclude some of the inconsistencies he's shown in the first 2 games, but there was a lot of positives. We have a drop in the Hall of Fame game that probably changes that game, there was he missed a few throws down the stretch the other day after he had gotten us the lead. We didn't hold on to the lead, and then we didn't recapture it. So I'm sure he wants to see more consistency, but improvement for sure.
Kevin Colbert with us. You've always had such a good line of succession when it comes to your linebackers. It was always the torch being passed from Lloyd to Porter to James Harrison. There seems to be a break now in that where you had to bring back James. You have to plug in Arthur Motes before the rookie first-rounder Dupree is ready, and with Jarvis Jones over the last 2 years, Jason Worlds maybe should have been somebody like that. Have you found it harder in recent years to find linebackers to best fit your team the way it used to be almost automatic?
No, actually, it's probably the opposite, Tim, because, traditionally our outside linebackers are converted defensive ends, so we don't know if they can do the things that we're going to ask them to do as far as dropping, having different run responsibilities, lining up in different techniques. But, Jarvis Jones played in a 3-4 defense, as did Bud Dupree. Now, not exactly the same as our defense, but they were easier projections because we saw them doing more things that we were going to ask them to do. So we're waiting for that to show up here. I think Jarvis got off to a great start last year before the wrist dislocation, and that's when we brought James back. And, of course, Arthur Mote stepped in for when Jason Worlds was injured. Of course, Jason decided to give up on football, so now it's Motes and Dupree, and on the other side we got James and Jarvis. And I think it's going to be a nice combination. How they play together, we're still trying to figure that out as we go through the rest of the preseason.
College coaches will recruit based, and they know in any given year they're going to lose guys at this position. It's a much more finite 3-4 year period. In your big picture, Kevin, your defense kind of all got old at the same time. Does that go into your draft strategy? Did Worlds quitting surprise you? Did you know he was even thinking about that? And did it make it particularly tough that Ike, Troy, him, you lose so many big defensive players over a 1 or 2 year period?
Yeah, I mean, they came, we've tried to draft, like Cam Haywood was really drafted knowing that Brett Kiesel would probably be moving on. Stephon Tuitt was thrown in. Jarvis was drafted, and as was Bud. And Jason's retirement was unexpected. Whether or not he would have come back here or not, I don't think we could make that determination because he was a free agent. But I think we would have had a chance to sign him. But you try to build, from within and keep adding. And we've tried to do that over the years, and it's almost impossible to – you get the offense up to speed, you're trying to catch the defense back up, and that's the way we do it, mainly through the draft. And I think right now our defense is younger, but I think we have guys in place that have the talent to do it. I know the coaches will put them in a position to do it. They just have to do it.
Is this team on defense capable of making the transition to playing more cover 2 and working in more 4-3? Because it sure sounds like you guys want to do that. When it comes to how you're 1-gapping versus 2-gapping your defensive linemen, and with the line, a lot of the defensive backs talking openly about playing more cover 2.
Yeah.
Have you gotten the guys that can make that transition? Because I would imagine, like in the past, you've had 3-4 guys.
Right.
Basically, you drafted for your scheme.
Yeah, and I don't think right now we are a 3-4 team. I don't see that changing drastically because that's the players you have. 4-3, 3-4. Mainly, most of the time when we're in a 4-man front, it's some type of nickel or dime defense. It's really almost impossible to run 2 different fronts or schemes because there's too many complications that would get involved with it. So I'm
by
sure.
By complications, you mean for the types of players you have on your team,
Well,
or
no,
are you talking about just
general philosophy of learning 2 defenses? There may be little different alignments where you have the same personnel to 3-4 personnel, and maybe the linebacker stacks instead of being on the line of scrimmage. Maybe some little nuances like that. But philosophy, it's really still a 3-4 defense. The secondary, I think we're trying to find out what we have in the secondary, and I think Coach Butler and Coach Tomlin will design a defense based on what we have, and I think we're still trying to figure that out at this point.
Chris Collinsworth was saying he was surprised that you were able to get Boykin from the Eagles for what you got him for. He thought it was kind of a steal. Tim and I were talking earlier about you haven't drafted cornerbacks at least early in the draft for a long time. Your philosophy about cornerbacks in particular, and did you kind of think you stole one from the Eagles?
No, I wouldn't say stole. I mean, they were willing to trade. We were willing to give up a pick. So, I'm sure they feel beneficial by having that extra pick, and we feel benefited by having the player. You think back about the Steelers even before I got here. I think the last first-round pick was Chad Scott. Mm-hmm. And then the highest players since I've been here have been second-rounders, Brian McFadden and
Ricardo
Copeland. So
I'll remember that one if you don't want to.
Actually, Ricardo ended up playing. He just retired last year. I think.
Are you kidding? He didn't retire until last year?
No, he ended up playing up in Canada. So, whatever his career was, it was long. I mean, he got in a good 10 or 12 years. But anyway, you look back on where you draft guys and positions, and the Steelers traditionally haven't drafted corners real high, but again, we just try to look at the overall success, and we've won Super Bowls with Ike Taylor at one corner and Brian McFadden at the other, and they were 2s and 4s respectively. So I think it's all relative. It's certainly not by intent. When you go into a draft, you just look at certain who's available at certain times, and realistically, the great corners usually get picked higher than we're picking year to year.
How are you handling Antonio Brown's situation here after Rosenhaus's little visit to Jacksonville?
There's Antonio Brown is under contract, and that's all there is to it.
Did you pull the shades and pretend you weren't home?
At least pick up the tab at the hotel bar?
I was sitting in my room very comfortably.
How hard has this become? Because it feels like, for as many advantages as management may have over players in the NFL versus the other professional sports, it seems like any time there's a good season had by a player now, he wants to renegotiate automatically.
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers have been very consistent in how they do business before I got here, after I got here. Players sign contracts. We expect them to honor those until there's a year left. The only time we've gone away from that is with the quarterbacks, and we've been consistent about, going to them with 2 years left, except for Ben this year. Ben didn't do his until he had 1 year left. So
Willie was an exception too, right?
Willie,
Parker, didn't you do something?
No, because Willie was exclusive rights. At that point, his contract was up after 2 years. Okay. So he was just an exclusive rights player that, those guys, their contracts expired after 2 years.
So still then the theory is just the quarterback is the exception.
And that's been consistent forever with this group. And, if a player has 1 year to go on his deal other than a quarterback, that's when we've gotten into discussions.
You and Mike Tomlin have been extended since the last time we talked to you. When you talk about consistency, and you work in a business like ours. You're here one day, you're gone the next. It has to be great to work for an organization that is as patient with their people as the Steelers have been with management and coaches.
No question. It's unmatched from a coaching standpoint. I never really studied the management side of it, but it's well documented that 3 coaches since 1969. It's unheard of in professional sports, and it just goes back to the Rooney family understanding the business. I think is good, if not better, than everybody. They understand that there will be an occasional, down season, but the expectations don't change. They expect us to compete for a championship every year, and that to compete, you have to make the playoffs. And when you miss the playoffs for 2 years in a row, it's not real comfortable. And fortunately, we got back last year. Now the results weren't what we wanted, so we know what the goal is. The goal's never going to change. It's a Super Bowl or nothing, and that's their expectations. But again, they understand that there will be a season when something happens and the results aren't so good. So you look back and you think about that year that we had like that. We were fortunate enough to draft a quarterback that is a franchise quarterback, and hopefully will carry us to more Super Bowls.
And sometimes you got to go 1-15 to get a guy like that,
Fortunately, we weren't that bad, but I'll take the result at pick 11.
When we go up to lunch, should we ask Cam Hayward and Marcus Gilbert if they really do want to see Tom Brady? Because it's starting to look like you're going to in week 1.
Nobody knows what that result will be, and if it is, I'm sure our guys will be up to the challenge. They'll be ready to go no matter who we play, and when that decision is made, we'll adapt. And I know right now, I'm sure they're preparing for both, and we'll see where it goes. But that's really something we can't control, so we don't worry about it.
I got it. Go ahead, Guy.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've got to. This is a tradition, so I have to carry it over to the TribLIVE radio outlet as well here. I can't let you go without asking the mandatory Penguin question. I always get a mandatory Pittsburgh Penguin question in with Kevin Colbert. So, Phil Kessel, for Sid's wing or for Gino's wing?
Boy, I'd put him with Sid. That's my. As a fan, I'd love to see that combination, because I think about Kessel like I did like Billy Guerin. A finisher, a barrier. Now, when Billy Guerin came in, he was at the end of his career, but boy, Kessel's just entering his prime, and his shot and his release. He's deadly with that shot. He's a sniper. So I think that will be interesting to see a nice finisher. But he's going to be a great player with either of those guys, because they're great players. It's just, I think it'll be a matter of chemistry as they unfold. But as a fan, it's exciting.